SETI's results for 2018 proves our effectiveness as a development partner, placing people at the center of our work and leveraging partnerships and cooperation to transform policy imperatives into action. With an eye on the rapidly changing global context, SETI is innovating to constructively address the emerging challenges and opportunities for the region. As part of our competitiveness program, SETI is designing precise tools to assess assets and capabilities in the productive sector to determine paths towards higher value goods and services. As our flagship program for partnerships, the Americas Competitiveness Exchange on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the OAS, will continue to leverage good practices and the power of networks to increase trade and investment in the region.
For us, the role of the OAS is very important, connecting countries, connecting governments and private sector, and letting us know what other countries are doing it and how we can replicate that in our countries to enhance development.
For me, who has come here to look at how can we develop our own ecosystem, our own innovation hubs, our own accelerators, I think seeing this, touching, feeling, seeing the transformation, seeing how quickly you've made it happen is a testament to what is possible. So I believe all of us leave here stronger than ever.
The Working Group of Experts on Subnational Competitiveness, the GTEX, is our gateway program to promote local economic competitiveness policies alongside municipal and state-level governments, together with the private sector and academia.
Este tipo de reuniones te sirven para darte cuenta de todo lo que se está viviendo en América Latina sobre los temas de competitividad. Y hoy justamente en este sector estamos viendo sobre todo los temas de innovación tecnológica, pues que si hablamos de competitividad tenemos que hablar de tecnología. Y me está ayudando mucho para abrir el panorama de ver lo que están haciendo otras ciudades y lo que podemos llegar a aplicar también nosotros en México.
The hub on the transfer and commercialization of technology is connecting and strengthening national innovation ecosystems in the region. Each edition of the hub trains budding technology entrepreneurs from the region's public and private sectors to take promising products and services from idea to market.
Porque es importante que estemos juntos en esto, porque la región tiene que estar unida y me parece que hay mucho conocimiento en la región que todavía no está explotado comercialmente como podría ser, y esta es la mejor manera de hacerlo.
Tenemos la proyección de cada año generar y compartir nuevas experiencias entre aquellos que contribuyen a la innovación. Queremos cambiar el cómo lo hemos estado haciendo en Latinoamérica. Queremos generar la unión de los países, queremos colaborar.
Our virtual platform on technology foresight, Prospecta Americas, will support OAS member states in identifying and mapping future trends and technological development of critical importance for the Americas.
Este esfuerzo, el cual viene siendo apoyado por la Organización de los Estados Americanos, nos permitirá tener una gran información para poder mapear estas iniciativas de innovación y poder que ellas contribuyan al crecimiento económico, a la competitividad y al bienestar de nuestras naciones.
Como bien sabemos, nos encontramos ya en la cuarta revolución industrial, la que está cambiando rápidamente la forma en que se hace negocios, se produce, se consume y se genera bienestar y entretenimiento en el mundo. Es la mayor amenaza, tal vez la mejor oportunidad que tenemos en nuestras naciones.
The Inter-American Teacher Education Network, the I-10, is working to improve the quality of teachers with an emphasis on science, technology, engineering, and mathematics education. In 2019, the I-10 launched the first STEM Teacher Fellowship of the Americas. The Energy and Climate Partnership of the Americas, ECPA, is working with governments in the Caribbean to advance electric mobility and clean transport as the sub-region pursues energy independence. Under our Integrated Water Resources Management Program, SETI is responding to the demand of member states for platforms and applications that enable data-driven policies. In the Central American region, for example, we are expanding the scope of Costa Rica's Plataforma Interactiva de Aplicación del Clima Tropical. This tool captures and disseminates real-time climate and water data, promoting resilient agriculture. The Inter-American Committee on Ports is building human and institutional capacity through public-private partnerships to address port modernization, logistics, and security. CooperaNet, SETI's multi-stakeholder platform for cooperation and partnerships, is being relaunched in 2019, responding to member states' call for a more robust hub for cooperation. In a region where 8 out of 10 consumers begin or end their shopping process online, SETI has entered into a partnership with the private sector.
Es una herramienta que sin duda acerca a las MIPYMES hacia la demanda que hoy está migrando a Internet, y con eso pretendemos mejorar las ventas y el posicionamiento de las empresas pequeñas.
As we look to the future, the Executive Secretariat for Integral Development will continue to leverage cooperation and partnerships to expand our reach, proving that together we are much more than the sum of our 34 member states.
Me and my kids have been there for over an year right now. And children are friends. It doesn't matter where they come from.
Nosotros estamos en una zona netamente selvática. La línea de adyacencia va desde el norte hasta el sur, va desde Modesto Méndez hasta Aguas Turbias, tanto en el norte como en el sur. Esta línea tiene 215 kilómetros de extensión.
De allí vino él, se buscó creo con los de la OEA y de allí vino el proyecto para acá, para Judá. Y fue que lo dieron el terreno y lo dieron todo que era mano de obra y el material para hacer las casas que están ahorita. Y por ese motivo estamos aquí viviendo todavía.
La misión continúa trabajando en la implementación de medidas de fomento de la confianza mientras se aguarda el resultado del reclamo que está atendiendo la Corte Internacional de Justicia por la disputa marítima, territorial e insular. Nuestra oficina en la zona de adyacencia realiza verificaciones a solicitud de ambos gobiernos, facilita reuniones y patrullajes conjuntos entre las Fuerzas Armadas y promueve una cultura de paz y cooperación entre las comunidades locales.
Children will be children and they have harmony. They don't see each other as a different country, but they see each other that they're growing together.
Hoy, esta organización es el guardián regional en defensa de la democracia, la libertad y los derechos humanos. Los países se han comprometido con estos valores a través de instrumentos legales como la Carta Democrática Interamericana, la Convención Americana de Derechos Humanos y todas las demás convenciones interamericanas. Nuestro trabajo es mantener los más altos estándares. Debemos ser objetivos, analizar los hechos, denunciar cuando veamos corrupción, inequidad o amenazas a la libertad. En esos casos, no podemos ser neutrales.
More than 100 years since the inauguration of this building, the OAS headquarters, our institution still brings together the peoples of the Americas to address our responsibilities as a partnership of nations. As we look to the future, our work must also focus on the construction of a positive agenda that continues to favorably impact millions of lives every day.
SETI's results for 2018 proves our effectiveness as a development partner, placing people at the center of our work and leveraging partnerships and cooperation to transform policy imperatives into action. With an eye on the rapidly changing global context, SETI is innovating to constructively address the emerging challenges and opportunities for the region. As part of our competitiveness program, SETI is designing precise tools to assess assets and capabilities in the productive sector to determine paths towards higher value goods and services. As our flagship program for partnerships, the Americas Competitiveness Exchange on Innovation and Entrepreneurship, the OAS, will continue to leverage good practices and the power of networks to increase trade and investment in the region.
For us, the role of the OAS is very important, connecting countries, connecting governments and private sector, and letting us know what other countries are doing it and how we can replicate that in our countries to enhance development.
For me, who has come here to look at how can we develop our own ecosystem, our own innovation hubs, our own accelerators, I think seeing this, touching, feeling, seeing the transformation, seeing how quickly you've made it happen is a testament to what is possible. So I believe all of us leave here stronger than ever.
The Working Group of Experts on Subnational Competitiveness, the GTEX, is our gateway program to promote local economic competitiveness policies alongside municipal and state-level governments, together with the private sector and academia.
Este tipo de reuniones te sirven para darte cuenta de todo lo que se está viviendo en América Latina sobre los temas de competitividad. Y hoy justamente en este sector estamos viendo sobre todo los temas de innovación tecnológica, los que si hablamos de competitividad tenemos que hablar de tecnología. Y me está ayudando mucho para ver el panorama de ver lo que están haciendo otras ciudades y lo que podemos llegar a aplicar también nosotros en México.
The Hub on the Transfer and Commercialization of Technology is connecting and strengthening national innovation ecosystems in the region. Each edition of the Hub trains budding technology entrepreneurs from the region's public and private sectors to take promising products and services from idea to market.
¿Por qué es importante que estemos juntos en esto? Porque la región tiene que estar unida y me parece que hay mucho conocimiento en la región que todavía no está explotado comercialmente como podría ser, y esta es la mejor manera de hacerlo.
Tenemos la proyección de cada año generar y compartir nuevas experiencias entre aquellos que contribuyen a la innovación. Queremos cambiar el cómo lo hemos estado haciendo en Latinoamérica. Queremos generar la unión de los
Buenos
países.
días a todos. Estamos concluyendo la fase de pruebas.
Good morning to all. We are just wrapping up our sound and video checks. Right now, As far as the quorum goes, we have Bahamas, Brazil, Canada, Chile, Costa Rica, Dominica, Ecuador, El Salvador, United States, Grenada, Guatemala, Guyana, Haiti, Honduras, Jamaica, Mexico, Nicaragua, Panama, Paraguay, Peru, Dominican Republic, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Lucia, Suriname, Trinidad and Tobago, Uruguay, and Venezuela. Those are the countries who have performed the sound check. Chair, we have a quorum. Thank you very much, Mr. Assistant Secretary General. Well then, good morning. Good morning, permanent representatives, alternate representatives, permanent observers, Mr. Secretary General, Mr. Assistant Secretary General, General Secretariat staff. As we do have the statutory quorum, it is my pleasure to call to order this regular meeting of the Permanent Council, the first one held with Paraguay as chair. As this is my first meeting as chair of the Permanent Council, first and foremost, I would like to reaffirm how important it is for me that the OAS is the political forum par excellence in the hemisphere. We will actively participate in relevant aspects of the Americas with a constructive approach where democracy, international law, and the defense of human rights guide the principles of our actions. Today, I will lead the discussions of this Permanent Council. I will do it as objectively as possible, and I will do so in line with the functions established for the chair in our rules of procedure. I will always seek to ensure that everybody can participate in these discussions. Rest assured that I will be a partner who will promote consultations, dialogues, discussions, and any other measures that can build consensus agreements and understandings. Given our current situation, we will remain up to date about topics on the international agenda. That is exactly what we will do today, in fact. We will also follow up on the mandates assigned by the General Assembly, especially as they relate to democracy and the rule of law. I would like to avail myself of this opportunity to respectfully urge all delegations to continue abiding by the recommendations of the proposed modus operandi for the Permanent Council during the extraordinary period of the COVID-19 pandemic. Particularly, I would like to urge all delegations to limit their remarks to a maximum of 7 minutes. The chair will be strict with time. Colleagues, before we take up the items on the order of business, on behalf of the Permanent Council, I would like to express our solidarity with the delegation of St. Vincent and the Grenadines and with the government and people of that member state who are suffering from the violent volcanic eruptions taking place at La Soufrière volcano, which started last Friday, April 9th, and that unfortunately are still ongoing. I would also like to commend the government and people of Bolivia for holding the second round of their elections for department, regional, and municipal level authorities. Likewise, we would like to commend the people and government of Peru for holding general elections. In both cases, these elections took place on April 11th. I would also like to extend congratulations and wish the utmost success to the delegation of Ecuador on the second round of their elections, which took place on Sunday, April 11th. The result of this was that Mr. Guillermo Lasso will be the president of that member state for the term that will start on May 24th. On another point, I would like to report that over the last few days, our distinguished colleague, Ambassador Maria del Carmen Roquebert León, permanent representative of Panama, received a commemorative mallet as she presided over our work at this Permanent Council over the first quarter of 2021. Ambassador Roquebert, thank you very much for your efforts, for your dedication, and for your commitment. let's move on to the first item on the order of business, which is the adoption of the draft order of business. Distinguished colleagues, in accordance with Article 43 of the Rules of Procedure, I would submit for your consideration the draft order of business, which is contained in document CP/OD-2318/21. I submit it for your consideration. As I see no requests for the floor, the order of business is hereby adopted. Item 2. The current situation of the COVID-19 pandemic in the region and vaccine access. Distinguished colleagues, as I said on April 6th, during the ceremony in which I was given the baton as chair of the Permanent Council, one of the subjects that I intend to continue discussing in this council is, without a doubt, COVID-19. My idea particularly is to understand the status of vaccine distribution in order to understand the different points of views of the member state representatives, as well as representatives of international organizations and other stakeholders. It is for that reason that this morning we will hear from experts so that we can have an update on the current status of the pandemic in the Americas and vaccine access. With that in mind, it is my pleasure to give a cordial welcome to the Permanent Council of the OAS, to His Excellency Dr. Euclides Acevedo Candia, Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Paraguay. Your Excellency, welcome to this forum. I give you the floor. I'm sorry, Foreign Minister, there's an audio problem. Could you start again, please? Chair, I was saying thank you very much for the invitation. This may appear to be a bold diplomatic move. However, really what I would like to do is greet the chair, to the influential Secretary General, Mr. Luis Almagro, and all representatives present at this meeting. I would like to hail the fact that we are holding this meeting on this Day of the Americas, because the OAS is a key political instrument that we must continue to use. We know that what we are trying to do here is manage dissent, but the goal of managing dissent is to seek consensus, and we must continue to seek consensus. There is no consensus without dialogue. There's no dialogue if we don't have any subjects to share information about. At this time, which is so critical for our region and the world, we have an undelayable need to reach agreements. Paraguay has given instructions to its representatives abroad that they should use dialogue as their key instrument. Their key tool is direct, fraternal, productive conversation. We cannot achieve equality, we cannot achieve prosperity if we do not exercise liberty. Latin America recovered its liberty at a certain point. And Paraguay, in fact, has shown its commitment to liberty. Once we got our liberty, we started seeking equality, which comes from development. Development is a result of investment. Investment comes from production and equal distribution of wealth. That is necessary, as growth does not just come from development alone. A few months ago, our brothers and sisters from the Caribbean said that we had to discuss the pandemic in the context of equal distribution of vaccines. What we haven't been discussing is the importance of equity in vaccine distribution, which hasn't happened. That means that our liberty is lacking a key component, which is equality. We are seeing hoarding of vaccine production, and as a result of this, our people are anguished and our people are in despair. Although we can resort to passion and we can view this as a tragedy, we can not stop seeking reason. The OAS has reasoning. The OAS has understanding. It can help guide us through the pandemic. Paraguay has placed an emphasis on working with international organizations. Unfortunately, the expectations that we had were not satisfied, nor were many of the expectations of our sister nations. That is why we need to go back to the request made by our brothers and sisters from the Caribbean to have the OAS play a key role. And we need to reach out to our international partners to make sure that vaccines are designed based on scientific parameters, while keeping in mind that science doesn't matter at all if we do not work with humanism. And humanism or humanity means that we have to reach the most vulnerable sectors of the planet. Everybody says, what will happen? Chair, Mr. Secretary General, representatives of the OAS, the question is not what will happen, the question is what will we do? Our member states need to have public health care, universal health care, education, security across the board. All of that is a prerequisite for our societies, and using democratic means, every country can do things their own way. However, these principles are indispensable. That is why this is a key time. I think that the OAS is a political body that can work alongside a financial body, the Inter-American Development Bank, and alongside other organizations such as the Pan American Health Organization. That organization can, in fact, reverse the inequity in vaccine distribution. Dr. Etienne at PAHO has done a wonderful job trying to solve this issue. However, production and laboratories do not always feel sympathy for our human issues. So what we have to do here is think not so much about how to address the pandemic, but what happens further down the road. Chair, you know better than anybody that this will pass. This will be defeated. This will come to an end. It will reach a conclusion. However, we need to think strategically about how to bring back our economies. Bringing back our economies requires making a commitment to brotherhood, sisterhood, and equality in progress, not equality in poverty and tragedy. We need to seek equality in prosperity. To do that, we will have to work intelligently and with determination. Chair, as we celebrate your inauguration as chair of this body, the Permanent Council, our response, our attitude has to be one of solidarity and fraternity. As we do that, we need to think deeply about the origin of the Organization of American States. So, in addition to greeting you, I want to express my commitment, my undying commitment to integration in Latin America, as well as peace and prosperity in our region. Thank you very much, Chair. Your Excellency, thank you very much. Thank you for this message. And thank you above all for accepting our invitation to this inaugural meeting of the Permanent Council under the chairmanship of our country. Your remarks are always right on point, as is your insight about political solutions to this issue. You can rest assured that we will follow the path that you have just explained. In fact, we are already doing that, and once again, we are grateful for your remarks. Dr. Clarissa Etienne sends her apologies to the Permanent Council since she had another commitment to address in an urgent matter that arose for her. However, it is my pleasure to greet and welcome to the Permanent Council the Assistant Director of the Pan American Health Organization, Dr. Yarbas Barbosa. Dr. Barbosa, it is a pleasure to have you with us again. At this time, I give you the floor. Mr. Barbosa. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that you can hear me. Madam Chair of the Permanent Council, Ambassador Lisa Reese-Diaz, Mr. Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Secretary Luis Almagro, Ambassadors, Dr. Chris Etienne sends her greetings, and I just wanted to say that it is an honor to participate in this forum, which is key for the Americas. We are all concerned about the situation that we are facing here, the situation we have been facing for many months in our region. We have countries that have gotten a grip on transmission. However, there are many countries that are seeing a growing number of cases. In fact, in all countries in South America, we are seeing significant growth in case numbers and deaths at this time. This includes all countries that share the Amazon. There we're seeing a very large growth in cases, especially in Brazil, Colombia, Peru, and other countries. However, this leads us to work with all governments to reflect on measures that might be effective to get transmission under control. We can carry out an analysis of what is happening in each country to determine measures that could reduce transmission more immediately and prevent healthcare services, hospitals, and intensive care units from becoming overwhelmed and from facing very dire situations in the countries as we have already experienced. I wanted to pull up a presentation here to share with you. This is a presentation about vaccine deployment. The Paraguayan Minister of Foreign Affairs made an important observation about equity in vaccine distribution. This is one of the biggest problems that we're seeing today. I just want to make sure you can see the presentation up on my screen. I'll go through this very quickly. This is the vaccine situation. We have many vaccines being developed. This is unprecedented in history. In fact, 86 vaccines are already in clinical development, and 186 have already reached preclinical development. This is a very important result, and it results from public-private partnerships all over the world. We already have 4 vaccines that have been approved by the World Health Organization for their use. This is very important because PAHO, UNICEF, and all UN bodies can only work with vaccines that have been pre-qualified or given emergency use authorization, EUM in English, by the World Health Organization. We have the Pfizer vaccine that already has it, as well as the SII vaccine from India, AZSK Bio from South Korea, and Janssen as well. We have other vaccines. in which the companies are providing information to the WHO and coordinating with that body to get emergency use authorization. We have Moderna, Sinovac from China, Sinopharm, and actually we're sending inspection teams to those factories. When we're working with manufacturers that don't have best practice certifications from the WHO, we have to carry out those inspections. So those were already done, and we're currently analyzing the information provided by those manufacturers. We have the AstraZeneca vaccine, which is being manufactured in 2 new places, that is Spain and Italy. This is very important because that vaccine will be provided in our region through the COVAX program. And that vaccine is in the final phase of receiving certification. And then we have Gamaleya from Russia. Since this also does not have the best practice certification, the WHO will send an inspection team. They're currently coordinating with the production team. That's a unilateral decision that will be made by the WHO, and they will evaluate the emergency use application for that vaccine. In terms of headway made in our region, we've seen significant headway. This is for the VIRAT evaluation through November 2020. Many countries have a very long red line here, which means that they hadn't initiated their activities, but now they're in very early stages. And then here we are in February and March 2021, and we can see that all those countries have moved into the green, which means they have sent their VIRAT evaluation. This includes different indicators for a vaccination plan that are self-evaluated. We also have national vaccination plans from 23 countries in the region. 10 of them are supported by the COVAX program, which is free. That was a mandatory condition for those countries. And then we have 13 other countries in the region which are participating in the COVAX program. They are submitting their information to join and receive technical support. Here we have a snapshot about the COVAX program, which is coordinated by the WHO, among other bodies. It has a whole shareholder council. Colombia is actually representative of middle-income countries on its shareholders council. Argentina is also on a subcommittee, and this can help see greater equity in the process. PAHO also participates in the vaccine procurement mechanism. UNICEF is also working alongside PAHO to carry out procurement processes. We have this whole process of procuring vaccines and allocating them and distributing them, which has already been decided. Here we have a graph which shows the vaccine allocation process. We start out with a joint working group for allocation. They start out their process. The WHO carries out an algorithm which was developed specifically for governance of the COVAX program. And the goal of this is to ensure equitable access amongst these 6 regions of the WHO. You have countries that support the process and countries that will self-finance. This working group reviews the work. It comes up with a group of countries. This group of countries is sent to an independent review body. And that body determines whether allocation can take place in a transparent way based on the algorithm. That is then evaluated or approved by the Director General of the WHO. It then goes to the COVAX office, and then the UNICEF PAHO joint allocation process begins and the procurement process. And then once a new round starts, you go through the whole process again. 36 countries are participating in the COVAX arrangement. 26 are self-financed countries. The COVAX fund seeks to provide vaccines for 25% of the population in its countries by the end of the year. If we go onto this graph at the bottom, we can see that countries have to confirm their participation. They have to have all of their regulations ready. COVAX talks to countries. It goes through their legal departments. It talks to attorneys in their government ministries to make sure that all regulations necessary are in place. Then procurement takes place and the vaccines are allocated and sent. I won't go through all of the landmarks that we have seen, but I just wanted to point out that calls for tender started in November. Why in November? Because COVAX is a novel arrangement. It came about at the end of last year. There was originally no funding for it. And we instead had to work with upfront contributions from self-financed countries. As was underscored by the Minister of Paraguay, once the procurement process started for COVAX, unfortunately, rich countries had already started hoarding many of the vaccines available. This leads us to think carefully about how we can improve equitable distribution and how we can use existing arrangements and have the necessary funds. We determined the indicative quantities for the first quarter of the year. In February, the mechanism started allocating vaccines to 20 countries around the world, including countries in our region, 9 countries in our region. Sorry about that. And then in February, we sent out a COVAX letter to all participating countries about allocations for February to May. In March, we saw serious bottlenecks with the 2 producers who we had begun deployment with. The Serum Institute of India ended up limiting exports. That body is no longer in a position to meet the commitments that it made with COVAX. There are 3 countries in the region who already started receiving vaccines from that producer in India. That's Bolivia, Nicaragua, and Haiti. And we also have the producer from South Korea who sent a letter that has been shared with countries. That letter said that it would deliver just 50% of the expected supply for COVAX. Right now, we are working alongside our suppliers so that we can meet our commitments in terms of available supply for the first half of the year. We have a 30-day delay. We are just delivering vaccines that should have already been in countries in early March, and that is because the producer didn't send the vaccines that they had planned to. There are countries that have Pfizer in their portfolio, and we have already sent the vaccine quantities allocated to them, and that allocation will officially start in June. Here we have a summary of the situation. The Serum Institute of India has had that issue with the government. And then South Korea has reduced its distribution by 50%. Availability will rise gradually, but significantly over the second half of the year. We think that starting in June, we will have many more vaccines that will come from the COVAX program. It will receive regular vaccine allocations from Pfizer and Janssen, and it will also expand AstraZeneca production.
Ver COVAX en el mundo.
Here we have the COVAX distribution in the world, and here we're talking about countries that received COVAX vaccines. The ones that are in blue are countries or economies that have already gotten into bilateral agreements or have donations, and here we're looking at Canada and South American, Caribbean, and Central American countries. We've got a lot of countries in Africa and Asia there as well in yellow. Here, the vaccines that have already been delivered in the region. We have a number of countries that have already received the vaccines, and by next week we'll conclude all of the first round of deliveries to these countries. Now, what we're discussing is the second round with the producers in the same order as the first round. And we want to have the 9 countries, Argentina, Brazil, Colombia, Ecuador, El Salvador, Jamaica, and Paraguay, that had a big reduction of the first rollout, so that in the next few rollouts in April and May, these 9 countries are going to have a larger proportion than the other countries, so that all countries of the region will have received about 2.2% for their populations. Here we have another demonstration of where countries can monitor and show all the vaccines that have been rolled out in the region, and thus far we have about 3 million doses in the region, which were delivered for 28 countries. We don't yet have in the region any deliveries for Cuba. At the beginning they didn't participate in COVAX, but it was necessary, but they were not considered in the allocation. Now for Haiti, Haiti is a country that is supported. It's not going to pay for the vaccines, but Haiti has had a lot of problems. We have to look at some of the administrative changes, the signing of agreements, regulatory issues, so that they can have the Astra vaccine, but thus far they haven't completed or finalized everything that the country has to do to receive the vaccines. Venezuela hasn't received this. This is a problem. And Venezuela has done its level best. It's really made an effort to pay and get financing for the COVAX mechanism, and now they're in high-level talks to seek funds for Venezuela that can be used to pay for the COVAX vaccines. Here you got a table, a summary of Brazil, Colombia, Costa Rica, Honduras, with the population, and then here are the countries that participated in an initiative that we had with a limited quantity, 4 regions, 4 countries only in the region out of everybody. Colombia received 117,000. This was the only country in this phase of the 3 countries in the region, and the indicative allocation is that everybody received their letters, and here we've got an indicative allocation, which is a little bit higher. Now the first round is complete between February and May, not till June, because we had smaller quantities, but here what we have allocated for the countries in February and March, which or received, though there was a reduction of 50% of the vaccine by the producer. What we've got 12 rollouts, one in May and another one, and now we're in talks with the producers to send to every country as soon as possible with the date, the flight, and the time, and the quantity of doses that are going to be delivered. Now we're also working with countries for a demand plan, because COVAX is committed to have or cover 20% of the population, but we believe that countries want to have the necessary coverage to guarantee controlling the spread. Some say 80%, others a different percentage, but we don't really have the real data. We've got models, And thus, we're working through the allocation fund with countries so that we can get an estimate of the coverage that they would like. Each country has to have a demand plan. It's really important to bear in mind this information and what we have thus far. 121 days is the first country started vaccinating, and here you can see the importance of COVAX for the low-income countries and the low average income countries. And the low-income countries, of those, 34% began vaccination with COVAX vaccines and 24% with donations or bilateral agreements. So most countries are with COVAX. Now, even for the low or medium income countries, 24 countries began with COVAX vaccines. So it's the same for deliveries. Mechanism is very important. What we have to have is to guarantee equitable distribution, equitable delivery. And this means that we have to have a more equitable state of play, not only in terms of the contracts that countries have developed, but otherwise as well. Here we're talking about what was already underscored, the inequity in terms of access to the vaccines. The high-income countries have 49% of the population that has received at least one dose, one shot of the vaccine, and then for the low-income countries, we only have 0.16%. In other words, we're talking about 163 times difference. Here we have another vaccination show of COVID in the Americas with the number of doses for every 100 people. Chile has 54%, United States has more than 46%, Antigua and Barbuda 26%, Dominica 24, rounded off Barbados 22.14. So in terms of the number of doses, in Brazil, we have a higher number. Now, you've got a table to monitor the vaccination, which is available on the WHO and the PAHO website. And then to conclude, ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chairman, it's important to recognize the progress that countries have made to prepare for the rollout of the vaccines. And it's also very important that countries that have joined and that have bilateral agreements and are using the COVAX mechanism to be borne in mind that I hope that all countries will receive the vaccines by the end of April. Everybody will have their vaccines in the country, and the WHO will be committed to continue to support countries through the rotating fund with other initiatives, donations, loans, and to provide technical cooperation to implement and monitor. Some countries are in talks with the OAS by way of the Secretary General Almagro, and other institutions. We're talking with countries that bought more vaccines than they need so that they can make donations to the regions. Now we're talking to the producers as well so that they can offer supply vaccines up to 20% for the rotating fund. And in a couple of days this week, we're going to share with countries the criteria that we're using for these vaccines. Let me just say that for the first quarter, then, the amount up to June is very limited, unless we change the mechanism that we have for access of the vaccines in the world. It's really important to strengthen oversight, because if you are vaccinating for the first time, but this is an unprecedented number in the world, this is something we have to look at, and I think that equitable access is necessary because there's a gap internationally without changes in the equitable access, not just to the vaccines. Don't forget that last year, this was also a problem in terms of access to the PPEs, the personal protection equipment for ventilators and so on. So the topic of access for tools to deal with a public health emergency and an international pandemic is key if we want to be better prepared to control, get a handle on this pandemic and to deal with other pandemics. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much, Mr. Barbosa, for your presentation, and to the Pan American Health Organization for this presentation and sharing it with this meeting. I would like to ask you to kindly have a copy of the PowerPoint presentation to the Secretariat, have it to share with delegations. Now we'll hear from Mauricio Claver-Caroni, who will round off our presentations and will speak. We have limited time, so given that, and following the agenda, I am very happy to greet and warmly welcome for the very first time around to this Permanent Council, Mr. Mauricio Claver-Caroni, President of the Inter-American Development Bank. President Claver-Caroni, it's a pleasure to have you here with us today. Be welcome, and you have the floor. Thank you very much, and good morning, and thanks to everybody. I'm going to change to English, but I just wanted to thank all of you in Spanish.
Session of the Permanent Council of the Organization of American States, and particularly for the opportunity to share the IDB's efforts over the last year to support our region during these extremely difficult times. I also appreciate the opportunity to look forward with optimism and to discuss how we as multilateral agencies and partners of the inter-American system can collaborate and strengthen our efforts to improve COVID-19 vaccine access and to enable a robust, sustainable, and inclusive recovery in Latin America and the Caribbean. As you all know, the COVID-19 pandemic is one of the greatest challenges that our region has faced in recent decades. And as of April 6th, there have been over 25 million confirmed cases in Latin America and the Caribbean and almost 800,000 deaths, which is the highest case fatality ratio in the world. Just this week, we've seen the terrible surge in the number of cases in Brazil and Uruguay, for example. And of course, this is not over yet, so we must remain vigilant and ready to continue to support our member states. This elevated number of COVID-19 associated deaths, which of course has hit the most vulnerable the hardest, is just one of the tragic consequences of the current crisis. And as you know, this pandemic has also hindered the provision of essential health services such as maternal and neonatal health and the screening and management of non-communicable diseases. And of course, this in turn has increased the risk of facing significant setbacks in our region's health outcomes. The pandemic has also generated an unprecedented economic and social crisis with devastating effects on employment, against the fight in poverty, and against the reduction of inequality. And when we look at the significant health, social, and economic costs associated with COVID-19, ensuring equitable access to safe and effective vaccines is the most important intervention for countries to reduce the transmission, to reestablish essential services, and to reactivate the economies, all of which are our priorities. But of course, to access COVID-19 vaccines in the region, as you all well know enough, has been very complicated and has been very unequal. A series of factors have been behind these problems, including production constraints, the difficulties offering manufacturers sufficient liability protections, and of course, purchases by high-income countries that have reserved production capacity. It's estimated that high-income countries have secured over 3.5 vaccine doses per person, while low and middle-income countries have secured less than 0.6 doses per person. That's an inequality. In Latin America and the Caribbean, the combination of bilateral agreements, the COVAX facility, and donations are still leaving 13 of the 26 IDB borrowing member countries unable to secure vaccine doses for more than half of their population. 7 countries may have enough doses to cover between 50 and 99% of their population, and only 6 are on track to reach over 100% of their population. Now, whether or not this coverage translates into doses administered by the end of 2021, however, remains uncertain. Initial delivery schedules may have been overly optimistic, and in some cases, commitments include vaccines that have not yet even received regulatory authorization. On-time delivery of doses in the quantities agreed will depend on the manufacturer's ability to accelerate production, as well as trade restrictions and transit controls. So we must act now and together to ensure that all countries can accelerate progress on vaccination, which is key, is absolutely key to kickstarting economic recovery. In 2020, we committed close to $1.2 billion in new approvals and reprogrammed numerous operations in order to help countries confront the health emergency and to save lives. About 15 countries directly requested support from us, and they were able to purchase diagnostics, medical supplies, and equipment. They've been able to reconfigure hospitals, conduct training, and adopt new information systems and management practice. And all of this has improved the capacity for testing, for treating COVID-19 patients, and for mitigating the pandemic's impact on the provision of other essential health services. On the vaccine front, as was one of my priorities, within the first 100 days, we committed $1 billion to support purchases through bilateral contracts and through multilateral efforts such as the COVAX facility, as well as investment in operational costs associated with vaccine deployment, the entire ecosystem, for example, cold chain equipment, inputs, training, communication strategies, you name it. And so far, we've responded to the request by 10 countries for this support, most of which, of course, are amongst our region's smaller and more vulnerable nations. And of course, we're in active conversations with others. We've also been supporting countries with technical assistance in various areas, such as vaccine deployment planning, implementation, and logistics. And of course, we've done this under the leadership of our colleagues from PAHO. Currently, we're working on a new initiative, the first international financial institution to offer guarantees that would provide manufacturers with assurances regarding claims for harms potentially related to COVID-19 vaccines. The collateralization mechanism for COVID-19 related indemnities, which we've created, would help governments in their negotiations, in their bilateral negotiations with manufacturers, which are hesitating to sell to some countries in which they believe they would be exposed to significant liabilities. We've left nothing on the table. In a great example of multilateral collaboration, which is why we're here today, we engaged with PAHO and other partners, including the Coalition for Epidemic Preparedness Innovation, to conduct surveys and collect information on vaccine production capacity in the region, but also in the hope that we can enable the production of more reliable vaccines in the region. And we're going to have some news on that soon, hopefully. We're working very hard through our IDB Invest private sector mechanism. And looking towards the future, a world where we must still mitigate the effects of COVID-19. As I mentioned, IDB Invest, our private sector arm, is actively discussing financing options with laboratories in the region to expand future production, because what we've learned here is that we must have production in the region. We cannot depend in other places of the world. Throughout this crisis, we've worked closely with our partners and our donors, such as PAHO, Gavi, the OAS, thank you for hosting us, the World Bank, to support our region in facing and overcoming the challenges posed by the pandemic. And I believe that this collaboration is key, is absolutely key to be successful in these efforts. So we need to do as much as possible and continue to do as much as possible at the regional and global levels, because as we know, the pandemics and the economic crises extend beyond political borders. Last spring, PAHO's speedy work with IDB support contributed to the region's engagement with COVAX. In fact, all the IDB borrowing member countries committed to participate in this global initiative. But much more work needs to be done. We should look for ways to productively collaborate to enable vaccine exchange programs between countries with surpluses and those with deficits through either existing mechanisms, or we need to create new ones. And we're ready to do so. IDB stands ready to continue working in partnership with the global community, and we believe it is the most effective way to address a global challenge that has hit our region the hardest. IDB is ready to leverage our financial and technical resources to contribute to initiatives that can help increase the supply of COVID-19 vaccines to our region. Each of our organizations has particular resources and mandates that we can bring all to the table so that Latin American and the Caribbean governments can vaccinate their populations and bring this crisis to a speedy end. I am very confident, and knowing our partners here and working with all of them, that through our collaboration, we can bring the region together. We can and we will find ways to ensure faster, more equal, and more affordable access to COVID-19 vaccines in Latin America and the Caribbean, and it is our responsibility to do so and count on IDB support. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Thank you very much for accepting our invitation, but particularly for the very good news that you shared with us in your presentation. Thank you very much. Moving on and following our agenda then, I would like to now give the floor to the Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Luis Almagro. Secretary General, you have the floor. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. It's a pleasure to see you chairing this meeting. We are at a critical place with spread and death by COVID-19, given the limited access to vaccines for populations in countries in the region. To cover this guide in terms of access to the vaccine has to be the absolute priority in social, humane, human rights areas. It's key to work so that these vaccines can get to all populations without any distinction whatsoever, without looking at logistics or cost as factors. There's no shadow of a doubt that there are other conditions for equity that we need. And currently, as the PAHO has said, 58 cases have been looked at. But inequality also is an issue, not only within our countries, but also between countries. The vaccines market is a cruel market. Those who have can buy, those who don't have go to the end of the line. So if you look at concentration in countries, we only have 8% of the population. 4 of the 10 most affected countries in the world are in our region, where we have about 40% of the problem. The PAHO shows a disproportion. We have to be clear about this and understand the urgency with which we have to act. And this is a topic which has to do with political action to generate conditions of equity and to move towards equality. We do have the tools that we have to use more robustly, more dynamically. The PAHO, Pan American Health Organization, has the competency in this area. It's a political issue, and obviously our commitment then is behind us so that we can get these equitable conditions and that be a priority. The PAHO has said that they have more than 212 million doses in 49 countries and territories of the region of the Americas. They have played a crucial role in the rotating fund, where 2.6 vaccines through the COVAX mechanism in 36 countries in the region, including the Caribbean countries. All of this has been done in a context of inequality in which the human dimension cannot depend on algorithms. It has to depend on humanitarian situations, attention paid to these situations, and to make progress in humanitarian arenas. And the issue globally is that 10 countries are 60%, which applied 3/4 of the doses supplied. More than 100 countries have not even received one dose or have administered doses which are only symbolic or political. So access against COVID-19 for all states to help their economies is crucial so that we can move toward total recovery. It's very important and it's crucial for the PAHO to play its role. It's crucial to see the IDB play its role in this regard, because financial assistance and additional financial resources is key to move forward in this issue and to generate the conditions of equity, given that financial accumulations in many of our countries don't exist or are null and void or are totally overwhelmed. So that we have to grapple with the issue of costs. And for that, there's no shadow of a doubt. Definitively, we do have to work in the dynamic situation which will allow for the Inter-American Development Bank and other financial institutions. International institutions have to have a decisive role of support in this process. We have to double up our efforts, and we have to call on the multilateral institutions to do their level best so that there is access to credit direct access, which will allow countries in the region to have the necessary resources to administer the doses in time so that they have or are in a position to have equitable access to the vaccines market. It's also key to have cooperation amongst governments and the private sector so that we can save lives and the health of people without any political considerations, without ideological considerations, without any of that, simply because of humanitarian needs that we have and that we have to safeguard for our people. Now, we know that there was a limited amount of vaccines, and that's why it's really very important to take this initiative, irrespective of manufacture or production of the vaccines. And we're really very concerned that the available vaccines will continue and will have to be for everybody without any exception. A few days ago, Dr. Etienne said that a lot of doses were still lacking to have full coverage to cover vulnerable groups. And in point of fact, definitively, we have to move ahead in a different way. We feel that it's crucial also, as was already pointed out, to have a resolution approved by the Inter-American Commission of Human Rights. The concepts there are crucial. They're key so that we can administer and vaccinate the entire population of the Americas. In the hemisphere, the OAS understands that we have to have a common objective, the well-being of our peoples, and the route towards quick and sustainable recovery. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. We will continue to coordinate between PAHO, the IDB, and the other inter-American organizations so that we can get better results in this regard. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Secretary General. And also, once again, thanks for the initiative with all of these aforementioned institutions for having vaccines in the Americas. Let's move on. I have on my list, and I should like to give the floor, and a warm welcome to Commissioner Antonio Urejola, President of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, and Mrs. Soledad Garcia Munoz, IACHR Special Rapporteur on Economic, Social, Cultural, and Environmental Rights. There will be some presentations, and then I would like to ask Rapporteur Munoz to share the presentations, and I would like to give the floor then to Commissioner Urejola. Commissioner, you have the floor. Commissioner Urejola, you have the floor. You are recognized. Un poco. Muchas gracias. Excelentísimo señor Euclides Acevedo Candia, Ministro de Relaciones Exteriores de la República de Paraguay.
Chair, thank you very much. Mauricio Clavero Carón, President of the Inter-American Development Bank, Secretary General Luis Almagro, Secretary General of the Organization of American States, Dr. Barbosa, Assistant Director of the Pan-American Health Organization, Mr. Efraín Guadarrama Perez, Director General of American Organizations and Regional Mechanisms from the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs, representatives of SELAC, permanent representatives. On behalf of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, I would like to welcome you to this regular meeting of the Permanent Council led by Ambassador Elisa Ruiz-Diaz. And I would like to thank you for inviting me to talk about the work done by the IACHR throughout the COVID-19 pandemic in the region. In particular, I would like to talk about actions taken to ensure equitable and universal access to COVID-19 vaccines. I'm here today with our special rapporteur on economic, social, cultural, and environmental rights, Soledad Garcia Munoz, whose leadership has been outstanding in this area. Since the WHO declared that there was a pandemic in March of last year, the IACHR has been using all mechanisms at its disposal to protect the human rights of people in the context of the current health crisis, especially people and groups who are facing the greatest vulnerabilities and those at the greatest risk of facing discrimination. In order to provide a timely response to COVID-19, the Commission has been coordinating in all of its mechanisms in order to support member states and help them adopt and implement public policies in order to contain and address the pandemic with a human rights approach. We have also issued best practices handbooks, specialized press communiques, and even a 3-part resolution with recommendations for states. We have one that is for 2020 on Inter-American guidelines on the human rights of those with COVID-19. And on World Health Day, the Commission published Resolution 1/2021 on the pandemic and vaccines in the Americas. This resolution reflects the urgency in the international community to ensure vaccines for all people and for countries to place human rights at the center of their decisions about COVID-19 vaccines. In order to do this, the resolution lays out guidelines and criteria for the states in order to promote equitable, fair distribution of vaccines and to ensure that all production, procurement, distribution, and management processes for COVID-19 vaccines will have a human rights focus and focus on international law. 1 year from the start of the pandemic, we need to vaccinate a critical mass of our population to control this pandemic. We are facing serious challenges such as new strains of the virus, global competition over a limited supply of vaccines, and global vaccine skepticism. The pandemic bases its resolutions on the fact that vaccines should be considered a regional and international public good. They should be available to all people without discrimination. They should be distributed equitably and fairly. They should be accessible and affordable for countries, for lower and middle income countries. Equity is essential not just among countries, but also within countries in order to put an end to the pandemic. The recommendations contained in our resolution seek to ensure that states, as the main guarantors of human rights, and other relevant actors such as international organizations and private enterprise can assume the full scope of their obligations throughout the vaccine process. By doing so, they should ensure rights, especially the rights to health and the right to life. In that line of thought, the resolution offers key recommendations based on the principles of equality and non-discrimination, human dignity, informed consent, access to information, transparency, the fight against corruption, cooperation, and international solidarity. The Commission can say that 1 year from the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, the global effort has led to the development and distribution of safe vaccines. However, in our region, only certain states have made swift headway in immunizing their populations, while other countries do not have access to a significant number of vaccines, or they haven't started the process at all. According to the OAS, 90% of people in lower income countries will not have access to any COVID-19 vaccine in the year 2021. In this scenario, characterized by deep inequality, the Commission seeks to eradicate the virus all over the region. The recommendations contained in our resolution serve as a tool to help countries generate appropriate mechanisms in order to provide vaccines to the most vulnerable populations. The Commission is making an effort to provide useful guidelines for all countries as soon as possible. We are also trying to foster the participation of civil society in this effort. On behalf of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights, I would call on the international community and OAS member states to organize more fora, establish financing, and create international arrangements in order to make the guidance in this resolution a reality. The goal will be to reduce gaps in vaccine access and reduce gaps overall between countries with the greatest technical and financial capacity and the lowest income countries so that those countries can provide vaccines to their people. That is, we need to ensure vaccines to all people in the Americas. Chair, with your permission, I would like to now give the floor to the Special Rapporteur on Economic, Social, Cultural, and Environmental Rights, Soledad Garcia Munoz. Thank you very much. Chair, thank you very much. Warm greetings to the Chair of the Permanent Council, Ambassador Lisa Ruiz-Diaz, Secretary General, Assistant Secretary General, honorable speakers, representatives, and colleagues. For my mandate, it is very important for me to participate in this meeting and talk about human rights and how we can see a recovery in our societies and our rights. Our resolution issued during the pandemic discusses the issue of vaccines against COVID-19. We have offered specific recommendations around 6 areas. I'll touch on each one of those briefly. First of all, for vaccine distribution, we have recommended that states ensure the affordability of vaccines through national vaccine plans and adopt a differentiated, intercultural, and cross-sectional approach to respond to multiple discrimination factors in vaccine distribution. States should also prioritize the inoculation of people who are at the greatest risk of infection and at the greatest risk in general in the pandemic. They should also seek to address vaccine scarcity and limitations. Second, there needs to be sufficient information about vaccines in order to fight against misinformation. To do this, the resolution says that information should be high quality, objective, timely, and culturally appropriate. Beyond that, I'm sorry I lost my place in my presentation. Information should also provide data on efficacy and safety based on the best available scientific information. States should ensure that their informative campaigns on COVID-19 vaccines actively seek to prevent xenophobia, stigmatization, and other kinds of discourse that promote hate, violence, and scapegoating of migrants. Third of all, in terms of prior and informed consent, the regulation says that all COVID-19 vaccines should be provided with free prior and informed consent of recipients, and member states should safeguard people's personal information related to their health records, including their biographical information. In terms of access to information, transparency, and the fight against corruption, the resolution states that states should actively disseminate data about registrations, studies, vaccine plans, and above all, information about vaccines in general. It should provide information about vaccines, and states should eradicate all discrimination in the distribution of vaccines in line with inter-American standards on the dissemination of information. Fifth, we have the issue of human rights, and for that, we have our thematic report from the Commission. This is a thematic report on COVID-19 vaccines. Based on our resolution, states should ensure that decisions related to the development and distribution of vaccines take into account the cross-cutting principles of human rights. We also recommend that national and international intellectual property regimes cease to be an obstacle for the equitable distribution of vaccines. Business decisions and decisions of a similar nature adopted by states should seek the best overall outcome in terms of public health and human rights and avoid competitive approaches between countries that ultimately hurt the countries at the greatest financial and economic disadvantage. Lastly, in terms of international cooperation, the resolution establishes that decisions should be guided by the principle of international solidarity that has also been mentioned at this meeting. For that reason, measures to restrict migration during the pandemic and different documents related to immunization should be based on the principle of equality and non-discrimination and be adapted to local vaccine plans. The Commission calls on countries vigorously to avoid nationalism and healthcare classism and ensure that vaccines can also reach lower and medium income countries, especially for people in situations of vulnerability. It is becoming more important to coordinate regional efforts based on solidarity. We at the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights are willing to work alongside all international organizations and countries present at this very important meeting of the Permanent Council. Thank you very much. Ladies, thank you very much for bringing this important resolution of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights to our attention. To conclude this item on the order of business, it is my pleasure to greet and welcome Mr. Efrain Guadarrama Perez, Director General of American Organizations and Regional Mechanisms of the Mexican Ministry of Foreign Affairs. He will give us a presentation about regional vaccine access efforts taken as part of the Community of Latin American and Caribbean States, CELAC, whose pro tempore presidency is being held by Mexico. Mr. Guadarrama Perez, welcome. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Chair. This healthcare crisis has tested our governments and made it necessary to find real solutions through effective multilateralism, consensus, and international cooperation. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken millions of lives all over the world and has caused a serious economic crisis. Our region has become the epicenter of the pandemic, and the main priority for our countries is obtaining vaccines to fight this pandemic. Mexico has negotiated with pharmaceutical companies throughout the world, and this will allow our country to vaccinate the entire population. To date, we have received almost 17 million vaccines. This month, we expect to get 6 million more vaccines. Day by day, the National Vaccination Plan, launched by the Mexican government, moves forward, and it makes us a leader worldwide. However, we should mention that no state in Latin America and the Caribbean can face this issue successfully alone. We need to collaborate, and we need to cooperate with one another in order to face this crisis. Since Mexico took over as pro tempore chair of CELAC, we have prioritized a common front against the COVID-19 pandemic by forming strategic partnerships in order to facilitate access to vaccines, as well as to promote healthcare self-sufficiency and to fight food insecurity. We are working alongside ECLAC to create a self-sufficiency plan for vaccines and medication in order to strengthen supply and distribution chains for these inputs. Likewise, we established a network on disease specialists. We are working with the Slim Foundation in order to promote the AstraZeneca vaccine as well. We promoted vaccines developed in our region at universities and research centers. We are also promoting the building of bridges between CELAC member countries and pharmaceutical countries. We have also held high-level meetings with partners outside of the region in order to address the pandemic in different ways. We have joined our voices in order to speak out about commercial blockades of inputs that could seek to fight the pandemic. We have fought for better access in the Caribbean. We have advocated for the democratization of vaccines, and work to improve supply chains. Chair, this is just a little bit of information about how CELAC has coordinated in order to overcome our differences. Today, CELAC is stronger than ever and gives our region a platform to speak with one voice. CELAC's experience shows us that our region can build consensus. The work that we have done at the heart of this body can serve as an example for other regional bodies who have not risen to the occasion, and to address the challenges presented by this crisis. This virus knows no borders and it knows no ideologies. That is why the OAS should be a body for us to build a hemispheric response to this crisis. But that has not been the case. This pandemic transcends specialized healthcare organizations. The challenge that we are facing requires policy-level coordination between countries to ensure equitable and timely access to vaccines. The OAS's weak response over the 14 months of the pandemic should not lead to indifference about the situation in the Americas. To respond to this threat, we need to find real solutions through effective multilateralism and consensus. This pandemic has taught us many lessons. One of them is how important it is to cooperate, and the fact that consensus building is not easy, but it will always be the best way to benefit our people. That has and always will be our goal in CELAC, and we are working to see the same in the OAS. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Guadarrama Perez, for your presentation. At this point, I give the floor to delegations, and I would respectfully ask you to limit your remarks to 5 to 7 minutes. And I say that even though the rules of procedure allow for 10 minutes, but we have a very full agenda today. I give the floor to the delegation of Antigua and Barbuda. And I just wanted to say that we can see Ambassador Abdullah from Uruguay, but the delegation of Antigua and Barbuda had hit the button first. Please go ahead.
Congratulations on the assumption of your chairmanship of this council. I take the floor just to make a small clarification. It is directed to the Honorable Minister Acevedo. What I from the interpretation was that he said, and I quote, "What has not been discussed is the equitable distribution of vaccines." OAS, and suggesting that that discussion had not taken place. If this is what he had said, I think there has been a misunderstanding because there has been that discussion. Council on the 17th of February adopted the resolution, the equitable distribution of COVID vaccines. That was drafted by Antigua and Barbuda and championed and supported by the Caribbean community and several other member states. So I would like to commend to the Honorable Minister the document CP Res 1165/21, the equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines. And also that resolution specifically requests member states and permanent observers with the capacity to do so to take actions to facilitate the equitable distributions of vaccines globally and in the hemisphere. Thank you.
Gracias, señora delegada. Ofrezco la palabra al embajador del Uruguay, Washington Abdallah. Tiene el uso de la palabra, señor embajador.
Ahí estamos. ¿Sí? Bueno, Presidenta, buen ejercicio de su mandato. Me vino muy bien ver el panóptico de todas las exposiciones, porque yo estaba preocupado, ahora estoy mucho más preocupado. Estaba preocupado por...
I was concerned. I was concerned because I was concerned about the speed of distribution of vaccines, and we had a meeting a few days ago at PAHO, at which Paraguay made very moving remarks. It gave an incredibly moving presentation. I won't try to quote the words of the Paraguayan Minister of Health. However, I would just echo that message. The expectations about vaccine distribution have not been met. It seems that certain countries maybe have a lot of them, and that's wonderful for them, but the fact is that many countries have not been able to keep up with the vaccination rhythm or pace that is needed to fight the spread of the pandemic. Just a few days ago, Joel Harari said, this crisis has been a big scientific success, however, a rotund political failure. I would reiterate, it has been a scientific success because scientists all around the world have cooperated to share information. And in just 6 or 7 months, they have been able to produce what would have taken 6 or 7 years before, but the political harmony has not been there. We have heard about expectations related to multilateralism. However, this will have to take place in a different way. It will have to involve all stakeholders from all different sectors. We heard from Mr. President Claver Carone. We heard from the Assistant Director of PAHO, and surely there are more stakeholders involved in this. We have heard that multilateralism can really work. I heard the tone of the minister from Paraguay. He spoke about the expectations surrounding equity and how they have not been met. And he said that this will be defeated. Yes, it will be defeated, but at the cost of how many hundreds of thousands of lives? Millions of lives have already been lost, and we have to ask ourselves how many more will be lost. At least here in the Americas, we don't see a quick solution coming. At least I don't see that. And instead of coming here and sharing my voice and insisting on things, what I want to do is gather information on what is happening, and that's what we're doing. I'm worried about the situation at the Johnson & Johnson laboratory. Yesterday, it seems like there was a pause declared, and that's one of the vaccines we were counting on. So that's something I'm very concerned about. I'm also concerned about what's happening with the AstraZeneca vaccine and the situation there. There was a long article in the Wall Street Journal that talked about a 20 to 40 year parameter. It was talking about this sort of viral reproduction machine. What I'm wondering is if we need to take specific actions or if we need to be operating with this more long-term vision in mind. In certain countries, we're seeing this this deadly viral reproduction. And we're seeing different results with different age groups. And so we need to study that and see if the vaccines will work equally for all age groups. We also have this issue of herd immunity. I have several reports here in my office that I've read, and I'm not clear on that, where herd immunity is. At first, they were saying it would be around 70%. Some are saying that herd immunity would be a little bit lower or higher. And I would like to know where we stand on that today. what the prevailing idea is on what herd immunity would be. Every country is doing what it can. My country is putting everything it has in this. We were hoping that COVAX would do more, but we have very limited resources for COVAX. We're having to get millions of vaccines from outside of that program. My president has gone out to negotiate with pharmaceutical companies and other mechanisms that exist to try to get further resources. I don't want us to be surprised by what's coming down the road. I am unsatisfied. I heard from everybody who spoke. I heard about this resolution and that resolution. And everybody reads from their book saying what has been done by all the different bodies around the world. But I think that we haven't done things very well. We have many multilateral organizations behind the efforts that we're making. And what I'd like to see is if in the future we can have a much more flexible, pragmatic, and productive approach. A rapid, flexible, effective, and productive approach. Because if we have another pandemic, and I'm sure there will be one at a certain point, if we're not ready for it, we will have to go through this torturesome situation. I never thought I would have to live through something like this in the year 2021, but the experts are saying that it could happen again. So we need to have solutions for that. Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Thank you for making that contribution. I give the floor to the Ambassador of Chile. Ambassador, you have the floor.
Madam Chairman, this March, it was a year since the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 a pandemic. The world has now come into its second health emergency year, with many countries in their second wave in outbreaks and with new variants of the virus. To have the necessary vaccines and to be able to efficiently distribute them has become the main challenge for states. Despite all of the individual and connected problems, this period has meant that I should underscore the role of science and health professionals in the quick rollout of vaccines that will give us a chance to hope with regards to the future. Now, in the case of Chile, thus far, we have vaccinated about 7.5 million people, of which approximately 5 million have had their vaccines, which is about 32%. And in addition, 3 million adults 60 years old. This massive vaccine campaign against COVID-19 is free of charge, voluntary, and began on the 3rd of February. Nonetheless, on the 24th of December 2020, health people in the front lines began to be vaccinated. Now, Chile has stood out as one of the countries that has vaccines against COVID-19 and has administered them for every 100 persons. So my country can look at a future where we have collective protection against COVID. These results have to do with the timely purchase of the necessary doses and the efficient vaccination process that we have carried forward, given the health network that covers the entire country. Nonetheless, we should also point out that this pandemic and our country has not been the epicenter of pain and the loss of life and citizens that have been the victims of this disease that affects the entire world. We know that COVID-19 virus has no borders. The current threat and future variants affects everyone, including the countries that have the necessary resources to manufacture or export the vaccine. We know that no country will be totally safe until a high percentage of the population has been vaccinated efficiently and effectively. And in this regard, our country is well aware of the urgent need to produce vaccines in the necessary quantities for everybody so that it'll arrive in the arms of everyone who needs it. Now, with regards to the 10th of February, the World Health Organization told us that 75% of vaccines produced against coronavirus were in the hands of only 10 countries. Chile, along with the other countries, has made an appeal to the international community to get together against the pandemic so that we can strengthen the existing mechanisms and push forward with a new international treaty which will improve the world's capacity to prevent and clamp down. This will allow us to have a more coordinated response to this kind of crisis. Now, to grapple with this worldwide issue, we need the commitment and the support of the international community altogether. We're working together, and only that way can we build a more healthy world. Madam Chairman, Chile will continue to take decisions with regards to the urgency and needs for vaccines and the necessary medicines for everybody, and it will be a priority, particularly for the most vulnerable populations or people, because this is the only way that we can end the coronavirus in our region and in the world. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Ambassador from Costa Rica is recognized. Good morning, Madam Chairman. Good morning to you and to everyone who is here at this very important meeting today. I truly appreciate the different presentations that have been made, and I would like to warmly greet the presenters. As the permanent representative of Paraguay, I would like to thank you for chairing this permanent council, which once again is in the able hands of a woman, and we're quite sure that in your leadership we will have very successful work taken up, and you can count on the support of my delegation. We truly appreciate the inclusion of this topic that we have on our agenda this morning, and we would like to underscore that in the face of this major challenge that we have this century caused by the coronavirus and leading to COVID, Costa Rica and other countries that are here with us have zoomed in on protecting the health of its people. We would like to mitigate the economic problems caused by the pandemic and also spearhead multilaterally efforts so that the distribution of this vaccine or the vaccines can be equitable. We truly appreciate the valuable work that the PAHO and WHO have done in support of the local health authorities, as well as all the efforts that have been made by financial institutions and the international financial organizations that have supported countries, particularly those with more fragile economies. Interdependence has shown that no crisis is small and the consequences can have a global impact. Nobody is safe until everyone is safe. Undoubtedly, the evolution of this pandemic and its grave sequelae is a reflection of the there will be a terrible effect and a multiplier effect, that is to say, and given that, we have to guarantee for people and all health people social safety nets that will have positive results for everyone with equal conditions, thanks to the investment of 5.30% of the GDP in a universal health system. And in this regard, then, we would like to underscore what was recently said by the President of Costa Rica, Mr. Alvarado, who said that the pandemic has shown the importance of being together, that we have to strengthen and walk together, because reality affects everybody. We have to walk together. So in the international sphere, Costa Rica has said that inequalities amongst the more developed countries and those that are developing are glaring because of this pandemic. And this affects democracy, international trade, migration, and getting to all of the objectives we're moving towards. And that's why all the initiatives are crucial and should be based on transparency and symmetry in negotiations. We would like to publicly underscore the role played by the rotating fund of the PAHO. Costa Rica joined the mechanism to purchase vaccines and guarantee coverage of at least 60% of its own population. And we hope that that will happen very soon. Now, alongst with the PAHO and other countries, we have a repository of patents that is universal, so that technological treatment and vaccines are made available across the board, and our country will share the experience that we've had in terms of plasma for immunization. We had the cooperation of a biomedical research lab from the University of George Mason in Virginia, and this technique is in its second clinical round to adopt the doses, and the efficacy will be evaluated by the University of Costa Rica and the Social Security and the Ministry of Health. The pro temp of ECLAC has looked at a COVID-19 observatory for Latin America and the Caribbean created by ECLAC to support monitoring of all the measures implemented to deal with the pandemic in the region, and will make available both public policies that the 30 countries of the region in Latin America and the Caribbean are taking to curb the impact of the pandemic, as well as an analysis of the economic and social impact that will be felt nationally and in every sector. I'm going to also underscore another ECLAC initiative, which points to the Caribbean First, it's called, for all of the efforts that are being made. But in addition, there's interest in applying a systemic approach when it comes to risk and disasters in the Caribbean during the course of this pandemic, which today makes it more necessary than ever to bear in mind what's happening at St. Vincent and the Grenadines. We have to come together when it comes to Soufriere, as we'll see on the next item on the agenda. So, that said, Madam Chairman, panelists, colleagues, availing myself of the presence of the President of the IDB, we would like to, as Costa Rica, to look at financing, and that we have more favorable conditions that will allow us to have an equitable access to health products against COVID-19, including vaccines. We have also promoted a fund to help economies that have been affected, states, it's called in English, where countries will generate 80% of the GDP and will offer 0.7% of their GDP for the fund. And this will be channeled through financial institutions that we have at our disposal. These are international institutions. And then finally, we would like to clearly state that Costa Rica's support behind Chile that proposes a treaty to deal with the challenges that can only be dealt with when we stand together with a spirit of solidarity and cooperation. As was said, this was done during the Second World War, and this will be done in building a better world, prepared to prevent, detect, evaluate, and effectively respond to pandemics and health emergencies in a coordinated way with a pan-governmental approach so that we can strengthen capacities and national resilience. The architecture of an international, more solid arena should include greater international cooperation to improve the existing alert situations and exchange of information and data, research, and distribution for the entire world of all public health measures that are necessary, so that we can have vaccines and we can have PPEs, so that everything is globally accessible. In a constructive spirit during these difficult times, we have to be determined. We have to trust our own efforts We have to trust multilateralism and in the regional organizations so that we can overcome the problems as we move on hand in hand. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you, Ambassador. I'm going to use the symbol which means time out. I give the floor now to Delegate Maldonado, delegation of Colombia. Madam, you have the chair. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I would like to greet you, and I would also like to thank the Minister of Paraguay and all of the panelists who have given us their illustrious presentations on this very important topic. The spread of COVID in Colombia is exponentially growing. To date, the country has more than 2,500,000 cases and 63,153 deaths because of COVID-19. The Ministry of Health has looked at a vaccination plan for 2021, and this will lead to herd immunity by immunizing at least 73% of the population. And as such, I would like to underscore that on the 16th of February, we began the immunization process of vaccines that are being distributed throughout the country. For 2021, we'll have 3,100,000 and some odd vaccines against COVID-19. We consider that multilateralism that is strengthened, this is one of the most important ways of finding solutions for the issues that humanity is facing. And we have to have a solution which will be coordinated to deal with all the coordinated efforts and all the sickness because of COVID. And we have to co-sponsor COVID efforts by Pan American Health Organization. We recognize and we understand that there's a universal approach for equitable distribution of vaccines. And as such, there's a recent resolution of the OAS where this commitment is mentioned. Colombia co-sponsors a solution for the UN Security Council on the 23rd of February this year, where we appeal to having equal access to vaccines. And in March, we had political move for access to the vaccines against COVID-19. We've received support from more than 100 some odd states. Now, to taking into consideration the commitments, Colombia continues to reiterate an appeal for treatment vaccines and develop technologies to deal with the new coronavirus so that they are effective, accessible, and arrive in the hands that they should, particularly for developing countries. Right now, we truly believe that the vaccines against COVID-19 is the most important tool for mankind so that we can move towards socioeconomic recovery across the board. And we will continue to cooperate multilaterally so that we can together deal with the pandemic. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much, Delegate. Carlos Khatiba from Ecuador has the floor. Thank you very much. I'm happy to greet you as you chair this meeting of the Permanent Council. Your recognized capacity, experience, and talent are a guarantee for the success of all of the work we do. I truly appreciate your words on democracy and the words offered last Sunday in my country where we had an election. And I should also like to commend you for the excellent way Maria Manverde from Panama chaired. We truly appreciate all of the presentations made by the various esteemed presenters this morning. We feel that this is a good time to reaffirm our commitment and to promote and protect human rights during these difficult times in which we have seen the tremendous loss of life in the entire world, and which in many ways we have had a good start to the vaccination process. In this complex scenario for the BID, the IDB, the IATHR, the OAS, we had a resolution on the vaccines against COVID-19 with an ICHR approach. And I say that the words from the ICHR is that we should avoid nationalism and health regionalism. We should guarantee and make sure that the vaccines get to the middle and low-income countries, and particularly for people who are living in poverty. And precisely these considerations, and my country has made its contributions and co-sponsored the Permanent Council document last February on the distribution of vaccines against COVID-19. And along that line, Ecuador had the human rights meeting presence along with other countries. And the document was adopted by a consensus on the 20th of March so that we could ensure equitable access, timely and universal access for all countries, for all those vaccines that can deal with the coronavirus. And yes, for access to production for the vaccines that has to be recognized as a common good globally. Despite the complex crisis and the resources that have to be looked at and the economic issues, we have given a priority with this pandemic, which has taken the lives of many victims and continues to hard hit our people, including with the new variants. The emergency on civil and human rights has to be looked at, and we have to look at a progressive implementation so that we can use whatever funds we have, and we have to ensure everything and contain the spread of the virus for all Ecuadorians. And the national government is coming up with strategies for vaccinating, the main challenge of which is to have efficient vaccination and to use the necessary mechanisms to inoculate the entire population. The government authorities have recognized all of the difficulties and all of the problems that have arisen because of this situation, and it has looked at a lot of changes. At any rate, plans have been executed over the course of the last few days in keeping with planning, and we have had vaccines that have arrived and inoculation of many members in strategic sectors as well as disabled people. And precisely yesterday, 25,000 people were vaccinated nationally, and we are trying to reach as many adults as possible, particularly located in the rural areas where they don't have internet. So that, to conclude, I should like to underscore the fundamental role to be played by inter-American organizations so that we can cooperate with all member states in these efforts that call for doses of international cooperation, as well as to get together and preserve the right to life and health, beginning with the most needy without leaving anybody behind, but moving beyond words to have more effective vaccination. At any cost, it has to be equitable for all of our countries. We're talking about the first priority so that all governments will be trusted in the efforts that they make and back up the declarations that are made by regional organizations under the leadership of the PAHO and IDB and others. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much, Ambassador. Brazil is recognized. Carmen Lucia has the floor. If the delegation of Brazil is not quite ready, then I should like to give the floor to Ambassador Maria Roqueper from Panama, and then we'll go back to the order of request. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I'm taking the floor for the very first time. Again, I would like to reiterate and wish you the best of success in your term. I'm sure you'll be successful, and rest assured you have the support of my delegation, and also with your permission, I would like to join with the expressions of solidarity for St. Vincent and the Grenadines during this difficult time for that country. We truly appreciate the inclusion of this very important topic on today's agenda, as well as the participation of Mr. Minister from Paraguay. And similarly, we truly appreciate the very valuable presentations made by all of the esteemed panelists. We have taken due note of those presentations, and also we recognize the work and the efforts that they make to achieve an equitable access to COVID-19 vaccines. Now, whilst it is true that we continue to grapple with the pandemic with less uncertainty thanks to the science that has been developed and with the hope that we get from the existence of these vaccines, we are still aware of the challenges that we have as a region to have equitable distribution of these vaccines. And precisely because our region, the region of inequalities, and here I go back and echo the words of our Minister, Mr. Inez, saying that the most important lesson that the pandemic leaves with us is the need to work together on problems that affect all of mankind. Given this, the principle that has motivated member states of the organization to approve on a consensual basis resolution equitable distribution of vaccines against COVID-19 on the 17th of February, we have to say that Panama, through the leadership of the Ministry of Health, we were able to receive vaccines in a timely way which have been applied strategically to the priority groups. And thus far, we have received 611,770 doses. Nonetheless, we know that this is not the only reality. Multilateralism precisely broaches topics that affects all of us as a group and gives us platforms so that we can come up with a reply more than just individuals. And thus, we truly commend all of the initiatives that seek to have and get vaccines to all peoples of the Americas. Just by guaranteeing the protection of everybody, will we be able to effectively overcome this pandemic. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I'd like to ask the delegation of Brazil if you are now ready. Are you available? Brazil can be given the floor. Brazil, please go ahead. You have the floor. Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. I'm really sorry for that technical hiccup. First and foremost, I would like to wish you the best of success as you chair the Permanent Council with full-fledged support of the Brazilian delegation for that success. And I would also like to say that we recognize the work carried out by Ambassador Roquebel during the time and during her term that she chaired this body. Madam Chairman, the timely inclusion of this topic on today's agenda gives us a valuable opportunity to exchange best practices and responses for the challenges of the pandemic, as we have heard in the minister speak from Paraguay and the other invited guests. I would like to avail myself of this opportunity to recognize and thank once again all of the work carried out by the Pan American Health Organization in support of member states as we grapple with the pandemic, and over and above everything else with regards to purchasing PPE, diagnostic tests, and resources and immunizing agents. We truly, particularly would like to thank PAHO's support with the rotating fund for countries in the region and for the COVAX mechanism or facility with a view to making more equitable access to vaccines against COVID-19. We are very interested in hearing the information about the efforts made by the WHO, IDB, and others to get vaccines over the long run. We continue to follow discussions on this topic, and we hope that they will be successful as soon as possible. Madam Chairman, currently, this has been one of the most challenging times of all for the Brazilian population. From the very beginning of the pandemic, the Brazilian government continues and has continued to make efforts and take all the necessary measures to grapple with the crisis. In this very difficult time, we truly lament and we express our solidarity to all people, all families that lost their loved ones because of COVID-19. The National Program for Immunization and the SUS, the Seoul Health System, is the most well-known vaccination program in the world, and we are dealing with 212 million people in Brazil. So the program is being used to vaccinate against COVID-19 without the demand of the normal population being affected. And up until the 12th of April, we had already applied at least one dose of the vaccine, and more than 23 million people. More than 7 million took the second dose, making a total of more than 31 million doses applied or administered in the country. And all told, we have a big challenge ahead of us. The total number of vaccinated with at least one dose represents about 11% of the Brazilian population. The Brazilian government has already distributed more than 43 million vaccine doses to the secretaries of state. And this quantity is enough to immunize all of the senior citizens above 70 years of age, and for those of 60 and above, and those who are in long-term care, adults with disabilities in shelters, and indigenous people 18 and over who live on indigenous lands, and people and traditional communities that are known as Quilombos. With regards to the Ministry of Health, the idea is to distribute more than 200 million doses by July, vaccinating as such 50% of the Brazilian population, all told. In keeping with the list of priority groups, we got in that regard a national plan to operationalize a vaccine against COVID-19. This is the main idea, that is to save lives. Besides dealing head-on with the health problem, we continue to make efforts to protect economic and social rights of the population during the pandemic. We know that Brazilians want vaccines and they want to work. From the very beginning of the health emergency, we approved financial resources, additional of about $164 billion to fight the pandemic. Of these, about 100 billion were used already. The fiscal efforts to deal with the pandemic is equivalent to more than 8% of the GDP in Brazil. Thus, Madam Chairman, these are efforts that we pull together, and as we've heard here today, that will help us to overcome this singular moment, and which is so much of a challenge for our country and our populations. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias, señora delegada. Tiene el uso de la palabra.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to the Dominican Republic. You have the floor. Chair, thank you very much, and good morning. Honorable Secretary General, Honorable Assistant Secretary General, distinguished colleagues and ambassadors. First and foremost, we would like to commend Ambassador Lisa Reyes-Diaz and wish her the utmost success as she takes over as chair of the Permanent Council, and we would like to express our full support for her efforts. The Dominican delegation wishes to express thanks for the presentations given on the current status of the COVID-19 pandemic across the region and access to the vaccine that was given by the Foreign Affairs Minister of Paraguay, Dr. Barbosa, from the Pan American Health Organization, the president of the Inter-American Development Bank, our Secretary General, among other speakers. The issue we're dealing with today is a key item on our organization's agenda. It cuts across essentially all work done in our organization over the last 13 months. We have expressed different kinds of concerns and talked about different levels of challenges, which include equitable access to vaccines. And as a result of that, this Permanent Council adopted a resolution on February 17th. The Dominican Republic has made significant efforts to successfully implement a vaccination plan against COVID-19. This year, in 2021, it has vaccinated almost 8 million people. As we said on February 17th, we believe that all member and observer states of our region are making significant sacrifices to acquire COVID vaccines for their different countries. However, if we do not have an equitable process, if we do not have a non-discriminatory process in vaccine distribution, efforts and sacrifices made, especially those made by developing countries, will be deeply hurt. So we would like to call on vaccine manufacturers once again, on developed countries, on international organizations, on international financial institutions, on the Pan American Health Organization, to continue to join efforts to ensure that COVID-19 vaccines can be distributed equitably across our region and throughout the world. Before I conclude my remarks, I would like to avail myself of this opportunity to reiterate our thanks to the Inter-American Development Bank and to the Pan American Health Organization for the valuable contributions that they have made to our countries throughout the COVID-19 pandemic in order to promote economic and health stability in our countries. Thank you very much, Chair. Thank you, Ambassador. I give the floor to Ambassador Gustavo Tare from Venezuela. Ambassador, you have the floor. Chair, thank you very much. I would like to start out by saying that I wish you the utmost success as chair of the Permanent Council. We would also like to reiterate our thanks to Ambassador Maria del Carmen for serving as chair of the Permanent Council. We would like to thank the Caribbean community for including this item on the agenda today. We would also like to express thanks on the COVID-19 pandemic in our region. Mr. Acevedo from Paraguay and the Secretary General Luis Almagro placed a particular focus on the importance of equity in the resources required to fight the pandemic. We also heard from distinguished ambassadors who spoke before me, and we would say that we fully agree with what they said. I would also like to reiterate our support for Secretary General Luis Almagro and his efficient efforts to ensure that we can have an equitable hemisphere level response. We are experiencing very difficult times, and thus far we have reached consensus on that. The Pan American Health Organization is the ideal body to respond to this challenge, and the Secretary General has offered his support to them. Chair, when we talk about equity, it cannot just be among countries, but must also be within countries as we talk about vaccine distribution. With that in mind, we would like to reiterate what was said by Antonia Obrejola, Commissioner of the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. We must respect human rights as we distribute vaccines. Due to poor management, the Venezuelan public healthcare system has collapsed. Our public health institutions and hospitals are in a deplorable state. And those people in high-level political positions get first access, as do Venezuelans who are able to pay for it. The numbers on COVID transmission and deaths are not credible at all. Nicolas Maduro hides the true dimensions of this pandemic. We have not seen any public national vaccine plan. Although our leaders tell us the contrary, and although our doctors are risking their lives. In our hemisphere, Venezuela has the lowest vaccination rates and is not a part of any of the programs mentioned by Dr. Barbosa today in his presentation. Venezuela spent $200 million acquiring 10 million Sputnik vaccines from Russia, which means that it overpaid by $100,000. And this has been a serious issue. The process of implementing the few vaccines that have come into Venezuela has been opaque. Nobody knows how many vaccines have actually come into Venezuela. Although we do know that the highest level authorities of the usurper government, including the President Nicolas Maduro, have been vaccinated. We would like to express our concern about reports of a black market to obtain the scarce vaccines we have. A vaccine today on that market costs over $500. The Venezuelan system has been opaque and it has been arbitrary. As an example of this, last week, workers of a Caracas hospital had been called in to receive vaccines. And while they were waiting for their vaccines, authorities from the National Bolivarian Police came in and announced that they were suspending that vaccination day and made them leave. Our dictatorship has denied us access to COVAX. However, on March 20th, through negotiations with PAHO and UNICEF and the participation of national medical academies, an agreement was reached, and it was agreed that $30 million would be provided for Venezuela to acquire vaccines through COVAX and to support the cold chain required for vaccination. We support the efforts made by the Inter-American Development Bank as they were explained by the president of that institution, Mauricio Claver Caron. When PAHO announced that Venezuela had been assigned 12 million doses of the AstraZeneca vaccine, Nicolas Maduro said that he would not allow those vaccines to come into the country. Spokespeople of the government said that that simply would not take place. This clarifies two things about Venezuela as it pertains to vaccines. Payments made by the government show that international sanctions do not prevent the government from paying for vaccinations as it has complained. It shows that the government could have acquired the necessary supplies a long time ago, saving lives in the process and providing necessary equipment for Venezuelan people. The second thing we've learned is that our government is not willing to do what is necessary. If Maduro had fulfilled the agreements reached with the international community, we would have acquired access to the COVAX program 1 month ago, and supplies would already be reaching Venezuela. Maduro's reticence and his obsession with controlling everything has led us to lose a significant number of lives. Chair, to conclude. Regardless of the mechanism implemented to purchase vaccines, the distribution of those vaccines should be carried out without ideological or political considerations. Our regime announced that it will use the cartel of the homeland, as they call it, to distribute vaccines, which will lead to an unequal distribution. We hope that Nicolas Maduro and his usurper regime will heed the message shared today, especially by Soledad Munoz Garcia from the Inter-American Commission on Human Rights. Thank you. I give the floor to the delegate of the United States. Go ahead, please.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for this opportunity to speak at the Permanent Council meeting. The United States would like to first thank Foreign Minister Acevedo Candia, PAHO Director Dr. Etienne, IDB President Claver Carone, and Secretary General Almagro for their presentations today. As emphasized by our distinguished speakers, global cooperation is crucial to meet the tremendous challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. President Biden is committed to working with our partners to end the pandemic, a top national security priority for the United States. To save lives and curb the pandemic, the international community must work together to ensure that global response activities, including vaccine access initiatives like COVAX, are quickly and fully funded and supported. The United States was pleased in March to commit $4 billion to COVAX. This included an initial $2 billion contribution to Gavi, the Vaccine Alliance, which will support the COVAX Facility Advanced Market Commitment, or AMC, to provide access to safe and effective vaccines for 92 low and medium income countries. We plan to contribute an additional $2 billion to Gavi through 2022. We want to work with other nations to expand support for COVAX and scale up vaccine manufacturing, supplies, and distribution. The United States is pleased to announce that we will co-host with Gavi the One World Protected Pledge event on April 15th. This event will launch an investment opportunity in support of the COVAX Advanced Market Commitment. The AMC expands the ambition of COVAX and aims to procure enough COVID-19 vaccine doses to cover up to 30% of populations in participating countries by the end of 2021. To truly bring an end to the acute pandemic, to this acute phase of the pandemic, we must aspire to vaccinate more people. We must come together as a global community to increase our ambition and ensure COVAX has the resources it needs. It is the global community's best path to equitably deliver safe and effective COVID-19 vaccines to populations in need around the globe. Again, thank you for the opportunity to speak today. The United States looks forward to working with you to end this pandemic.
Gracias.
Thank you, sir. I give the floor to Ambassador Wendy Acevedo from El Salvador. Go ahead, please. Thank you, Chair. As this is your first meeting as Chair of the Permanent Council, we would like to wish you lots of success leading the committee and express our full support to you. We would like to reiterate the message shared by Mr. Euclides Acevedo, the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Republic of Paraguay, surrounding this relevant issue. We would also like to thank the high authorities from PAHO, the Inter-American Development Bank, and others for their presentations, and thank Secretary General Luis Almagro. To date, COVID has claimed the lives of almost 1.5 million inhabitants of the Americas. It has had a deep socioeconomic impact at all levels, which has deepened inequality, poverty, and vulnerability. Given that, we are at a decisive point in order to try to control this global emergency. We have achieved the development of vaccines in record time to fight against COVID-19. This has been a global milestone. However, this impact will not have the desired impact if the vaccines are not distributed equitably. This requires resources, cooperation, and international solidarity. We must remember that no country will be fully safe from this pandemic until we all are safe from it. The availability of an effective and accessible vaccine against COVID-19 should be considered a global public good. We need to ensure that all people have access to the vaccine as well as diagnostic tests. This is a political and moral imperative. We have principles in El Salvador that guide the vaccination effort to make sure that the most vulnerable groups have access to it. Thanks to the efforts made by the government of El Salvador and solidarity offered to us from PAHO and neighboring countries, we have received shipments of vaccines purchased with our own funds, as well as vaccines sent to us by the COVAX facility. On April 12th, Nayib Bukele, our president, initiated the first phase of the COVID-19 hospital. This also led to the development of a vaccine site with specialized personnel and lots of space. On the first day, over 8,000 elderly people were vaccinated, and we hope to expand the capacity of our immunization strategy to reach over 10,000 people at that site per day. Across the country yesterday, we vaccinated over 46,000 people, which exceeded the desired target. We are focusing on healthcare workers, frontline workers, teachers, public and private administrative personnel rather, people over the age of 80, and people with chronic diseases. We just opened up vaccination for people over the age of 60 as well. As a result of this, our country will reach 30,000 people per day, but that target will only be met if we have an appropriate volume of vaccines to keep up with our efforts. El Salvador thanks PAHO, the WHO, and our partner countries for their important support during this time. This crisis, above all, requires a regional response, and that is what we seek. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ambassador. I give the floor to the delegation of Canada. Go ahead, please.
I will be presenting my remarks this morning in both of Canada's official languages, starting in French, then switching to English. Au nom du gouvernement du Canada, je retiens à remercier les éminents panélistes pour leur importante présentation d'aujourd'hui. La pandémie COVID.
On behalf of Canada, I would like to thank our distinguished presenters from today. This crisis knows no borders. Canada should work in collaboration with others to address the pandemic and fight its devastating impact on our economy, our society, our health systems, and the world's most vulnerable people. Canada acknowledges the significant challenges that our region faces, as well as the bottlenecks that are bringing to a halt the distribution of vaccines. We would like to express our solidarity with all member states at the OAS. We all need to adapt to this new situation. The Pan American Health Organization continues to be a key partner for Canada. Working with them, we can address priorities in the Americas. As we see increasing challenges related to COVID-19 in the region, PAHO becomes increasingly important. We need to work with them to provide key support and support the unprecedented work being done to face the crisis. PAHO has worked to support prompt vaccination and to prepare countries in the region.
Countries, Gavi, the COVAX facility, and vaccine manufacturers to explore all possible options to ensure doses get to the people who need them all around the world. Merci. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, señor delegado. Tiene el uso de la palabra el embajador Edmond Boschir.
Thank you very much. I give the floor to the ambassador of Haiti. Go ahead, please. Chair, good morning. The ambassador had to step out, but he asked me to speak on his behalf. Chair, first and foremost, I would like to commend you on behalf of my delegation. Congratulations on taking over as chair of the Permanent Council. You can count on the tireless support of the Republic of Haiti over your chairmanship. We would also like to avail ourselves of this opportunity to express congratulations to your predecessor, Ambassador Roquebert, Permanent Representative of Canada. We commend her. The delegation of Haiti would also like to express its sincere condolences to the government and people of St. Vincent and the Grenadines for the eruption of the volcano La Soufrière. We would also like to reiterate our solidarity with the government and people of that nation. Chair, like other countries in the region, Haiti is dealing with the COVID-19 pandemic, which has dealt a hard blow to our economy, especially in key areas like agriculture and tourism. Haiti is currently undergoing its hurricane season. And this makes it even more complicated for us to address the enormous challenges we face. This doesn't just apply to Haiti, this applies to all other Caribbean states. My country continues to be vulnerable to the pandemic. Through management on the part of the government, we have been able to slow the spread throughout our country. Regionally speaking, we can only face the pandemic with solidarity and cooperation. We believe that vaccines are one of the key instruments that will allow us to reach the light that we can see at the end of the tunnel. Nevertheless, these vaccines regrettably are not available to all countries in the region. So the Republic of Haiti expresses its support for the resolution equitable distribution of COVID-19 vaccines adopted at this Permanent Council. That resolution includes possible solutions for equitable production and distribution of vaccines. Chair, my country wishes to reiterate its commitment to the institutions of the Inter-American system. We would also like to reaffirm our trust in their abilities to face these challenges, threats, and other issues at a regional level that are posed by the COVID-19 pandemic. Chair, thank you very much. Thank you very much, Delegate. I now give the floor to Ambassador Luis Cordero from Honduras. Sir, go ahead, please. Ambassador, you are muted. Thank you very much. Chair, good afternoon. As this is the first time I take the floor today, I would like to congratulate you on becoming chair of the Permanent Council. We know that under your leadership, the reins of the Permanent Council will be in good hands. I would also like to extend congratulations to Ambassador Maria Roquebert for her excellent leadership of the Permanent Council over the last few months. A little bit more than 1 year from the start of the COVID-19 pandemic, we continue to be unsure when this nightmare will be over. We have made headway in our vaccination efforts, and that has helped us get beyond peak levels. However, many countries, including Honduras, do not have enough supply of the vaccine. Our country has been advocating for accessible, equitable distribution of the vaccine for months. We will not be safe until we are all vaccinated. We appreciate the efforts made by the WHO and PAHO to create the COVAX facility. Through this facility, my country has obtained access to a first phase of vaccine distribution. We are certain that these vaccines will not cover our entire population, so our government has been talking to pharmaceutical companies all over the world to try to save our people. We cannot forget that the pandemic has also led to an economic setback, which is very dangerous in our region. According to ECLAC, COVID-19 has led to the largest economic contraction in 120 years, with a 7.7% drop in GDP in our region. And we expect a 3.7% rebound in 2021. In addition to that, natural disasters caused by climate change in October and November were a serious issue, and I'm referring to hurricanes Era and Iota. Vaccinations need to be for all, so we have to join efforts and raise our voices through this inter-American body so that we can ensure the health and well-being of our people. Only together can we solve this problem. Thank you very much. Thank you, Ambassador. I give the floor to Ambassador Hugo de Sela from the delegation of Peru. Ambassador, go ahead. Chair, thank you very much. First and foremost, I would like to commend you and wish you the utmost success in your efforts. Please count on our collaboration. We would also like to thank the permanent representative of Panama for her efforts as chair of the Permanent Council. Lastly, we would like to congratulate our colleagues from Ecuador and Bolivia on the elections that took place in those countries on Sunday. This once again helped solidify our regional democratic process. In terms of the issue at hand, Madam Chair, I would like to express my delegation's thanks for the presentations that were given today. Those presentations helped shed light on the true magnitude of this issue. I would also like to add a few brief comments of my own. I think that this serious crisis that we continue to face has shown us that although we are making efforts in the multilateral arena, these efforts were and continue to be insufficient. One advantage of being here is that you can hear the different points of view from representatives of the respective countries. And one thing we've heard, one common ground that we all have, is this widespread point of view that from a multilateral vantage point, although we have made some efforts, there is still a lot to do, Madam Chair. When we talk about this concept of a global public good, well, thus far it has just been a declaration of our intentions. Thus far, it is just an objective that we are seeking to attain. I think that we still need to make a very large effort and an ongoing effort to move from words to actions. Every day that goes by, more people are dying all over our region. Every day that goes by. This pandemic continues to impact us, so it is urgent that we take action. We welcome the possibility of seeing cooperation between our organization and the Inter-American Development Bank. If there is work to be done there, I'm sure that our Secretary General and the President of the bank will make significant efforts to ensure that this cooperation bear fruit over the short term. Peru is a country that believes deeply in multilateralism. We have demonstrated that on multiple occasions. And Chair, I would like to finalize my remarks by saying that you can count on my country as we make this multilateral effort to overcome the pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ambassador. Now that we've rounded off the list of speakers, the chair would like to thank all of the presentations that were made, particularly all of the ideas that came together with regards to this topic and activities that have been carried out and other things that will come. I'd like to say something about the SELAC presentation and the OAS. In this regard, I would like to underscore that since the 17th of February, by unanimous vote in the Council, we approved the resolution on vaccines against COVID-19. And in this text of the resolution number 5, it speaks about counting on PAHO with member states so as to overcome the barriers and launching the vaccine against COVID-19 as decisions to be looked at and regulatory issues as well. As Dr. Barbosa said, PAHO is totally fulfilling that mandate. Now, we should like to underscore that the OAS is a subsidiary organization created by other bodies, and it is a regional health body, including under the World Health Organization. I also wanted to mention the initiative that was mentioned by the IDB. This has to do with production of vaccines throughout the hemisphere, alluded to by the Secretary General, and the political will that is involved. In all of the comments made, Secretary General, I think that it points to politics in this hemisphere, and that we have to pick up the banner and move ahead with the efforts. If any of the speakers would like to take the floor before rounding off the topic, I open the floor for that. Nobody wishes to take the floor? Very well. That said, then, the chair would like to take a break because of interpreting needs, and we'll come back at 2:30 this afternoon. The Secretariat is going to distribute a new link for this afternoon's meeting so that you can connect at 2:30. Thank you very much, and we'll see you in a couple of hours. Thank you very much.